A quick note before we start. Everything here is gathered from public sources online, so some details may be incomplete or out of date. I'm not an expert. If you spot a mistake, please drop a comment so I can learn and fix it. Thanks for watching with an open, curious mind. Take off your glasses, but if you don't wear any, you're in a club that is quietly shrinking. Now look at something across the room. The edges are soft. That blur is your brain guessing, very politely, at a shape it can no longer resolve. Here is the strange part. Your eye is not broken. It is not a factory defect, and it is not a punishment for your habits. It is an instrument that builds itself. Your eye spent your entire childhood measuring the world, deciding how long to grow, calibrating itself to the light it was handed. It is one of the few parts of you that is allowed to design itself, using the evidence available. It did that job perfectly. It simply believed the world you showed it. And the world you showed it had a ceiling. You already have a suspect for this. Everyone does. And the suspect has an alibi. In the year 2000, roughly 1.4 billion people were nearsighted. Myopic, if you want the clinical word for it, about 1 in 5 humans alive. By 2050, researchers project that number will reach close to half the planet. 5 billion people, give or take, all squinting at the same horizon. That projection comes from a 2016 analysis in the journal Ophthalmology, led by Brian Holden. It pooled data from 145 separate studies and more than 2 million people. Now, hold that number still for a moment and notice what is wrong with it. Evolution does not move at this speed. Half a planet's eyesight cannot change in 2 generations, because a gene pool does not change its mind in 40 years. Your grandmother's DNA did not receive a software update in 1987. So whatever happened here did not happen in the gene pool. It happened in the room, which means there is a culprit, and there is an obvious one sitting right there in your hand. The screen. It is bright, it is new, it is close to your face, and everyone already resents it a little. It is a very human mistake, and a slightly ironic one, being short-sighted about nearsightedness because the dates refuse to cooperate. Nearsightedness exploded in communities that had never seen a smartphone. When foraging and rural populations gained literacy and formal schooling across the 20th century, myopia climbed steeply within 1 or 2 generations. That pattern was reviewed by Lauren Cordain and colleagues in 2002, drawing on decades of earlier fieldwork. Some of those communities went from almost no nearsightedness to rates approaching half the young population. The most advanced screen in the room was a chalkboard. A phone cannot be blamed for an epidemic that began before it was invented. The screen has an alibi, airtight, and yet the screen is still standing in the story because it is not the culprit. It is the accomplice who keeps you at the scene. So if the screen is not what did this, what do the actual trials say? In 2015, a team led by Ming Guang, he ran a randomized trial across 12 primary schools in Guangzhou, China, roughly 1,900 6-year-olds. So the intervention was not a drug, it was not a lens, an app, or a supplement. It was 40 extra minutes outside at the end of each school day. 3 years later, the children who went outside had a myopia incidence of 30.4%. The children who stayed in had 39.5, 9 percentage points of human eyesight, purchased with recess. That is the entire miracle drug. Doors. The results were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and they were not a fluke. Catherine Rose and colleagues had already caught the signal in 2008 in ophthalmology, and their finding has an uncomfortable shape to it. For 200 years, the thing everyone blamed for ruining young eyes was books. Reading did not turn out to be what mattered most. Standing outside did. And in 2018, a team led by Pei-Chang Wu found the protection tracked the brightness itself, not merely the time outside, outdoor light intensity, which suggests the variable was never what those children were looking at. It was where they were standing while they looked. A child who reads a book outdoors appears to be largely protected. Nobody has yet run the trial where you hand that same child a tablet in full sunlight, so nobody gets to promise you the answer. But in the data that does exist, the hours outdoors mattered more than the hours spent staring at something close. which leaves the screen in an awkward position. Not innocent, just not the thing on trial. And here is where a certain comforting story usually arrives, and it needs to be stopped at the door. The story says your ancestors had perfect eyes, hawk vision, a golden inheritance, pause, squandered by modern life. It is a beautiful story, and it is not true. In 2022, Duncan Stibbard Hawks and Corin Apicella measured the eyesight of 182 Hadza foragers in Tanzania, people who hunt and gather, who attend almost no school, whose close work is minimal. Between 5 and 10% of the Hadza under 40 were nearsighted. Low, far lower than any industrialized country, but not zero, and not exceptional, say, roughly what you find in rural communities anywhere on Earth. The title of their paper says it without flinching. Low, but not exceptional. Nearsightedness is probably about as old as primates are. So there was never a superpower to lose, there was only a childhood lit differently. Picture a Hadza child. She wakes at first light, and the day simply happens outside, foraging, walking, watching a horizon that is genuinely far away. Her eyes spend the whole of it doing the thing eyes were shaped for. Looking up, looking out, tracking whatever moves. And all day, without anyone intending it, light is pouring into them, an amount of light your living room has never once produced and was never designed to. In February 2026, researchers at the SUNY College of Optometry proposed a mechanism that might tie all of this together. Writing in the journal Cell Reports, they suggested the driver is not the screen, but sustained close focus in dim indoor light. The pupil does exactly what it should. The retina simply receives less light than it needs, while the eye is still deciding how long to grow. That team is careful, and so is this. The study's senior author called it a hypothesis, not a final answer. Genes matter, close work matters, the mechanism is still being argued over. But the observable fact underneath the argument has stopped being controversial. Take a child's light away, and the eye grows too long for the world. So what kind of childhood does that describe yours? And this is gentler than you might expect. Your childhood happened indoors, not because of a phone, because of school, because of homework, because of the commute and winter, and a parent who reasonably did not want you roaming until dark. Every one of those choices was sensible. Most of them were made by someone who loved you. No single one of them stole anything from you. That is what makes this so difficult to see and so difficult to blame. There was no decision, no moment, no villain anywhere in the building. There was only a slow accumulation of reasonable roofs, and together they built a cave. A cave with excellent lighting. By cave standards, and Wi-Fi, your eye is still doing its job. It is still measuring the light, still deciding how long to grow, still trusting that the world it was shown is the world it will have to live in. It just never learned that the roof was optional. Or